Endure and survive, and welcome everybody to another episode of Lunch Table Podcast. In this episode, we're going to give you our review for episode 9 of The Last of Us, the series finale. If you guys haven't known, we've been reviewing episode by episode ever since episode 1. So guys, stick with us. Dylan, what a beautiful ass episode and also very emotional. But let's get started with your thoughts.
1 sec. That's how I feel. No, a wonderful finale. I think there was a beautiful use of symbology in the ending. It was very moving, and I really think it shows the culmination of Ellie and Joel's journey over the series. I think Pedro, Pascal, and Bella Ramsey gave wonderful performances, as they always do. But I know you probably know all this since you played the game, so let's tell me what your thoughts on the finale.
I've enjoyed it so much. I think the cold opening was brilliant, right? It featured Ashley Johnson, the original voice of Ellie, as Ellie's mom in this series. Wow, how symbolic. We get to figure out how Ellie became immune to the infection. And then we also get beautiful moments throughout this show, like bittersweet moments between the two. And obviously there's a lot of harnessed trauma and also a kinship. And I think that dynamic was beautifully shot in this very short episode.
Yeah, I think it was great that they included Ashley. I like how they find ways to incorporate the original voice actors into the show. So it was cool. I love that opening shot, and it was a nice foil. It was like they went all the way back to the past for this season finale, right? And it's kind of a parallel to what we see towards the end of the episode, and we see Marlene, and she's faced with this choice, a very heavy choice. But yeah, and also we see Joel and Ellie, of course, right after the last episode. I think Ellie was kind of going through this trauma after what happened with David. So I think it was interesting because like in the beginning of the series, like Ellie was very talkative and Joel was very stoic. So in this episode, it's kind of like the reversal. Like she's trying to like, comfort Ellie and, keep her spirits high, right?
Yeah, just like the game too. Exactly the same as the game after she's been through that. And I think what's beautiful is in the game, you don't really know when she's going to be more talkative. But I like that once they had that dialogue, they open up even more. And so he even asked her to tell some jokes. It was kind of like the game. It got very personal. And kudos to Pedro Pascal. What a dynamic character. And the character is very controversial. I remember since 2013, a lot of people are debating the ending still to this day. But that just goes to show how realistic and deep the story that Neil Druckmann has crafted actually went. And props to Craig Mazin as well. I think the changes he made really worked well for television. So yeah, I love everybody here.
Yeah, it makes me wonder now, like, I think it's so appropriate now looking back that they chose Pedro Pascal because he plays very father figure characters in a lot of his roles too. And it's funny, we were talking about how Mandalorian, how he always plays characters that can't let go of his kids, right?
Yeah.
But it was beautiful, and I love that little exposition of him talking about the missed shot that left his scar was actually a suicide attempt. I think that was a great way of showing Joel's vulnerability and him trying to open up with Ellie, and he's kind of letting a little bit of details about his daughter in this episode because he wasn't really talking about Sarah that much, but as we see, I think he's kind of comfortable around Ellie now. And also I love the scene, I think this was in the game too, correct me if I'm wrong, with the giraffe.
Yes.
I thought that was great too. That kind of reminded me of Jurassic Park when Lex was feeding the brackies.
Right. Yeah, it's a bittersweet moment and it's a very iconic moment. That's what you think when you think of The Last of Us, is that part. And Craig Mazin wanted to adapt this game just because that final level harnessed everything from the past and it brought it into the final level, and it's all about choice. And you have sweet moments like that, and you also have very ugly moments, and I think that's the embodiment of love, was that whole level and also this whole episode. And what I love the CGI too. I thought the CGI is really great with the giraffes. Well, since you have never played the game, what's your thoughts on seeing that imagery?
It's a weird thing that they throw. It's like, I don't know, it's like seeing them like the monkeys or the horse. They or even like the arcade episode with Raleigh. I think they find ways to make the past seem like it was a better time, right? Just like this little moment of like Ellie like feeding a giraffe. It's like she's not experienced with the past, but it still shows that whatever she's been through, she still kind of has this innocence of being a child in her, and I think that's wonderfully portrayed.
And it's also very sad too, because we get to see later and the sequel that's getting more and more stripped away. But I think the past can be a very comfortable place to live in. She's a big fan of the past. We've seen posters in previous episodes and stuff. And in her mind, that could be very comforting when you're faced with all this trauma. And again, it's bittersweet seeing, just this animal that you wouldn't. I never thought that in an apocalypse I would see a giraffe.
Right.
That's why it's so iconic. It's so random, but it works for some reason. And again, I love seeing how Joel is trying to, I don't know, cheer her up a little bit through little dialogues here and there. I have to admit, one thing I am disappointed about is the key moments they cut, gameplay moments. I wish they featured more of those. There was supposed to be this big tunnel sequence with a lot of infected. They cut that out. But I think, again, the emotional action really came in clutch here. And that's when we got Joel admitting how he got that scar. Let me get your thoughts on that moment, because in the game that was significant, just that little banter. But let me get your thoughts.
Which one? The scene where
just talking about the scar and stuff like that, because then
that was beautiful. And I agree. I think the emotional part's important, right? We saw like the infected chasing Ellie's mom, but we didn't get too many of them. But I think it would have been too distracting. I think they wanted a more human element in this episode to kind of carry the burden of emotion that we felt. And I love that scene where they're kind of like talking together, and Joel even like kind of like pleads with her to like leave with him, right? To like just forget this whole mission and experience like their own life, I guess. I think in a way it's kind of like he doesn't want her to have such a heavy burden, right? Because she's a child. I think if she was older, it would have been different, but because she's a child and because he kind of sees her as like his other child, right? I think he kind of wants her to have a life of her own and not have to be burdened with this responsibility of saving humanity, right?
Yeah, and maybe it could also be very selfish of him to not want to continue this mission because he lost Sarah. And again, both these characters, they have a lot in common. They don't want to lose people. They've already lost a lot of people. So that's why there's this magnetism to both of them. And that magnet is love. And there's moments where you feel very sorry for Joel. And I think actually this is portrayed really well in live action compared to the game. I think the game still is like super great, but when you see the live action part, it's kind of sickening. I don't know. It's like it's weird, right? You feel kind of weird seeing this, but I think that comes down to your personal beliefs as well. And but moving forward. Again, they changed the tunnel sequence, and instead we have the two getting jumped by, we don't know who, soldiers, but it ends up being the Fireflies, and they wake up in the hospital. And that hospital, St. Mary's Hospital, is very iconic. So I want to get your thoughts on a conversation between Merle and Joel, and probably her psyche.
You mean Marlene and Joel?
Oh, I'm sorry, Marlene. I said their actress's name. Yeah,
I was like, ooh. Yeah, I think that's why I think the opening scene was important to include, because it kind of I love that line that Marlene said, "I'm the only one who understands you because I was the one that was there when Ellie was born, so I understand. I had to shoot her mom, right? So if anyone understands like ripping this child away from you, it's me, right?" And it is kind of heartbreaking to see Joel finally showing how much he cared for Ellie, because Druckmann even said this is a different Joel that Marlene has seen, because Joel is very stoic. He's very isolated. The only one he really cared for was Tommy, but I think now after meeting with Tommy, I think he realizes Ellie is the only one that he really cares for, and he expresses so much anger and emotion. I love how Pedro kind of put it on screen for us. And it turns violent and it gets very ugly, as you said. This man went on a whole rampage just for one kid. But I think anybody who is a parent or has a loved one would probably do the same thing in Joel's shoes. I think, number one, I think he just couldn't bear the idea of losing another child he was close to, right? He doesn't want to go through another Sarah thing, especially when he has control over this situation, where he feels like he can do something about this. And it could be also that, like I said before, like she's a child and she doesn't really need to be burdened with this responsibility, and most of humanity is fucked anyway in the show, so it's like, does he really care for anybody else but Ellie,
Yeah, and I think it's also a great showcase of how trauma when you're younger can build up. And I think they did it beautifully in this series thus far, because each episode had foreshadowing of this end, basically. There was a lot of talk of choice and ugly things that had happened. And, Anna Torv's character, Tess, says, save who you can. And he couldn't save Tess. And, just all these characters are living rent-free in Joel's head, and they become examples. And the main example is really Sarah. And so when you see that he says he has a choice too, this is the time where I'm going to commit an atrocity. And that's why The Last of Us is a very complicated story. And that's why a lot of people, I think, they hate The Last of Us Part 2, because it's a very mature story. You could kind of pull parallels to the real world and some choices that had been made. And once you figure out the whole story, I think you'll see that not everything is black and white. So yeah, that action sequence, finally, at least they saved that. I think it was important to also show that. It was kind of like, beating somebody when they're already down in a way. It's very symbolic. I'm glad they left that in there. I think that was really epic to leave that in there as well, just seeing how capable he is. Finally, this man is weak, he says, and he's not weak anymore because he has to save his daughter. And so this was the moment. And hey, love is actually not always beautiful. It's ugly. And love is a great, like I said before, love is a great motivator, but hate can be a great motivator as well. And we see that.
I think that scene was well choreographed. He was a monster, and he felt like they were ripping his loved one away from him. And it really showed us, like, he was so cold with every kill that he committed, right? He even shoots the doctor, right? I think it was just so well done. I think Pedro really plays so badass characters, like, that just, are filled with like blind rage, but it's not always blind. It's because of love, like you said. That's why he's committing these atrocities, because he cares for Ellie, right? And I think if Ellie was probably put in the same situation, she'd probably do the same thing. So yeah, it was wonderful. And then it was sad to see, like, once he actually gets Ellie, he has to face Marlene at the end. So what did you think about that final showdown?
Recreation. I always found it really interesting that this choice he made to finalize it's in the garage. It's the one place where you could actually leave. This is the last point where Marlene is going to try to convince Joel, and he's very meticulous in the way how he's taking care of the fireflies in this whole part. It was a recreation of the game. I think they did it really well. I think, what scared me was it kind of was like a jump scare. It was the gunshot noises. Have you noticed that? It's like, it jumped and I just jumped a little bit. First of all, I'm so glad that Merle Dandridge, she had so much screen time, and she was the original voice of Marlene. That was so cool. But I don't know. It's very, in a way, it's like, it's very sad what she had to do. It's, again, no one is really a bad person here, if you think about it. Like, they're all kind of bad. They're all kind of good. It's you kind of have to think about the bigger picture. And I think that whole scene, they said a lot without saying a lot, basically, because there was so much on the line. And I think the way how they handled that in the game and here, they did it perfectly. And especially that jump cut when he's riding the car was a neat surprise for people who haven't played the game. And then they get to see, oh, actually, Ellie's there.
Yeah, it was a surprise for me, actually. I thought maybe he would actually reconsider, because the expression on his face made me think that he was going to let Ellie go. But as we see like you said, in the car, we see she's in the backseat, and it's like, oh, okay, well, obviously he had to kill Marlene to get out of this, right? And I think also just having Marlene in that beginning scene was kind of like a parallel, because now Joel was kind of faced with the same choice that Marlene had in the beginning of the episode, right? He has to either kill a close friend or let Ellie go, and I think he made the, in a way, kind of selfish choice. But like I said before, I think he wanted Ellie to have her own life, to make her own choice, right? And I think also because maybe the Fireflies didn't tell Ellie that they had to kill her. I mean, it was kind of, sneaky in a way. Why wouldn't you tell Ellie the risks, right? I think she didn't really have her own consent in that moment too. But it was sad yet to see, and I love how they he hid the gun under Ellie, they didn't show it. But he was so cold and so merciless, and it was kind of sad because I feel like Marlene and Joel had so much history together, but it was kind of taken away in one kind of sad moment.
Yeah, so I that whole end scene was very shocking when you're playing the game, and still to this day it'll be controversial. And I just love everyone's performance. I'm kind of surprised how fast the actual ending is. That's where they make it to Wyoming, because in the game it was quite a hike, and that's how they ended it. But then they recreated the whole thing. But what they changed was that Joel tears up a lot, and this, compared to the game, he didn't really tear up that much. So in a way, it's like this guy is hurting from the inside, and I think that's how you craft the really authentic characters through these intricacies. And he's basically lying to Ellie, and I loved how they added to that dialogue in the car, and he says, "I'm sorry," and everybody's just so guilty. Ellie's guilty that she couldn't save Sam. And this trauma, I think, will live with them for the rest of their lives. But the only way you push that trauma away is through violence. And violence is sometimes necessary, and they showcased it here. Let me get your thoughts on that final hike. Because for me, that was one of my favorite parts in the game, too, was that, they're trying not to say much to each other. So let me get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's like you said, and like Joel said, it's sometimes things get in the way and you have no choice to do things, right? But it's kind of like what Neil Druckmann said too. It was when you're a parent, you kind of have to lie to protect your kids. So I think by hiding the truth from Ellie, he kind of, it is kind of selfish, but I think Ellie would have been too impulsive or emotional if she had heard the truth too. So I don't know what other choice he could have given her, right? And I think for the most part, he did the right thing by saving her. Albeit, it's more guilt on his conscience because he had to kill so many people to do this. But I think, he gave her the best way out. And yeah, that hike scene I thought was beautiful. They're just talking, and I think Ellie knows something's up, and that's why she even asked him is this the truth, right? Because she's a smart girl, and I think she even learns from Joel, right? Don't trust anybody, even Joel, right? Mm-hmm. But I think even though Joel kind of lied to her, I think she still thinks something's up, and I think maybe that'll be a ramification for next season.
Maybe, yeah, I think so as well. Next season is basically, or I think it will be, this episode, but for every episode, it's a very toxic type of story, a very gray in the gray type of story, and I think they set it up perfectly. Again, the whole show was really great. The writing was great because they made some changes, and I think it really foreshadowed what will happen later on. I think Joel sings a song to Ellie in the beginning of the second game, and the lyrics started with, "If I ever were to lose you, I truly will lose myself." And Joel has felt very lost, and he had certain anchor points. He had Tess, Tommy left, he was just some smuggler just trying to get by. But now he has a purpose. And so he realizes that, well, I failed my purpose 2 times. My daughter died, and the love of my life died. I will not let you die, and I will commit atrocities just to save you. And that's why I think that end scene, he's lying to her as you would to a child. If something horrible had happened, you wouldn't want to expose the truth, even after, I mean, Ellie's been through so much trauma already. Why add something else? And I want to keep you. I don't want to lose you. And yeah, there will be ramifications for that between the two. And there might be a divide.
I just think, that truth in general, or that truth specifically, would have hurt too much because Ellie was so focused on making it to the end. Like, she even talked about this episode, like, I want to see this, to the finish line, right? So I think just hiding that truth, would have, or admitting the truth would have hurt too much, because now she'll probably feel like, she failed in her own mission as well, right? Because her one thing was why so many people died was so that she could stay alive, right? To help humanity. But yeah, great episode overall. Man, this series was awesome. As someone who hasn't played the games, I loved it. And, I'm definitely going to get into the games soon before part 2 perhaps comes out in the near future. So yeah, I know you're a huge fan of the series. I want to get your final rating and what you thought about this series overall.
Yes, I definitely will give this episode a 10 out of 10. I think they nailed it through the emotional action and also just the regular action. Finally, we get to see something like this. And it was very sickening to see. The score was amazing. The performances also were so complex and amazing. And I think this episode's runtime was like 45 minutes. So the fact that they could cram all that in there, I think it will always be iconic in television. And I'm so thankful that Craig Mazin got behind this and they got Neil Druckmann to also produce, direct, and write. That was really awesome. I love this episode so much. So again, I will give it a 10 out of 10. Give me your rating.
Have to agree with you, man. 10 out of 10 for me. This episode was awesome. Every episode was awesome, man. Just from beginning to end, I think this is one of the higher tier video game adaptations, in my opinion. I think the actors were so smartly chosen. Their performances on screen just gave, so much emotion conveyed. And it, like you said, everything from the score down to the cinematography was just beautiful on screen.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, that is our review for episode 9 of The Last of Us, now streaming on HBO Max. We will be having like 2 or 1 video coming out talking about the future of The Last of Us, so stick with us for that. I hope you guys are actually watching me say this stuff. I really hope. If you are, whoop the like button. And also check out our other playlists as well. We do plenty of reviews. But Dylan, take us away.
Yeah, check out other reviews, guys. Check out our playlists. We have so much more content planned for the rest of the month. We'll be doing another show of Akram's favorites, Succession, coming in this month. Can't wait to do that as well because I'm a big fan of that show as well. But yeah, check us out on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, as well as YouTube. But until then, guys, endure and survive.
Endure and survive, and see you guys.